Question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services, yeah.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we have also here the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN. There are very mixed feelings and a number of different opinions. In fact, the those who consider Ratko Mladic as a criminal are probably not as...
Hello, good day and welcome. I'm your host, Roel Rollocks of Assuage Business Development Limited. And in this special feature, we're calling it 868 to the World, Building Global Connections. We peer into the lives and experiences of Trinidad and Tobago nationals who've done tremendous work globally, regionally, right? And pretty much everywhere you can think about, you can find a Trini or a Trinbagonian, right? So we all know that Trinidad and Tobago is rich with global talent. We have nationals who have gone in the spheres of business, entertainment, the creative arts, you name it, and made a tremendous impact. But a lot of these stories have not been told. And part of our effort in this particular series is to hone and collect these stories so that we can learn and that we can be encouraged and make that impact. So there's a lot of untold stories that we'd want to uncover. With us today is what I would want to who would want to consider a national treasure. Today with us is Robert Lahunt, well known in the area of government and business and international business development, and he's with us to share a little bit of his story, particularly as it pertains to doing business abroad in the African market. So, Mr. Lahunt, a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Great, really nice having you.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Good day, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes. Really, really excellent to have a man of your experience with us. And I know that you can speak to so many different areas, you know, having touched on so much in your illustrious career, even, you know, at Development Bank at an international level, I see. But how would you, in your own words, define what you do?
Well, you know, when you say that, what I do now or how do I link all these things together?
What do you do now and how do you link all these things together, both?
Well, I mean, right now I'm a little bit, I could say I'm retired. But then do you really retire? So over the last, I've just completed our contract after leaving IDB as the executive director. I worked as a strategic consultant with IDB Invest to put in place some strategic initiatives to facilitate the expansion of private sector lending for Caribbean countries. When I was at IDB at the executive director level, I got the organization to expand the amount of money and reduce some of their criteria in getting businesses access to lendings with the IDB. And therefore, coming out of the position after a year's hiatus of traveling, I went back to see how could you promote this initiative and what are some of the other administrative elements that we need to put in place to ensure that our private sector could tap in to this wider amount of capital and developmental capital for the IDB. So that's what I did for the last 6 months, which I think was very rewarding because, you know, it's one thing I figured out when you worked with those development institutions. You never get what you deserve, you know. You get what you fight for. Right? And it was very surprising when I looked at the IDB how much money they were actually lending and what percentage of their lendings was actually in the Caribbean region. And I was surprised to find out it was only about 2 to 3% of their total annual lending. Wow. What we were able to negotiate in my 2 years as executive director, we have now improved that ceiling up to 10%. Wow. So there's a tremendous amount of funding that has now been put in place in an expanded capital of IDB for the private sector. And therefore, we need to put a mechanism, staffing, structures, and so forth, for now for the private sector to have access to that money and to really utilize it for the development of the region. Because I truly believe that we need to get a new breed of entrepreneur in the region, and we need to encourage our older entrepreneurs to get into new lines of business. Yes. But that requires a little bit of hand-holding, of which IDB is now prepared, or IDB Invest is now prepared to do.
But tell me something though, my sense is, and I remember speaking with a colleague recently who was at the World Bank, despite the work that they do in developing countries and regions, there's still a level of blindness. Would you say that you, coming from the region and being there, was able to see and enlighten in a way that otherwise that enlightenment would not have come?
Well, you know, I think, yes. I mean, at the end of the day, I go back to what it is I said. I mean, people, you don't expect anyone when you go to these places to give you anything. Yes. When you go to represent your country and the region, and in that case, I was the executive director on the board representing the region, every executive director is fighting, right, for a position. My position at the end of the day was IDB's mandate is to service Latin America and the Caribbean. And I made the point that the sea in the Caribbean is a small sea. Yes. And when you look at the amount of money that was being spent and the resources that you had in the Caribbean, I felt it was insignificant. So we are now, as I said, looking to triple the amount of money that was spent there. Yes. I also felt that the products that the IDB offered, you had to not only produce money or get more money to spend, but the products that you offer need to be able to be tailor-made for smaller countries. Our countries, our islands and the regions are smaller, they have smaller populations, and they need a different type of focus. So it can't be the same product that you're selling to Brazil and Argentina. You have to be prepared to tweak the products and to offer products that are in keeping with our business culture and our business environment. So that was important. And I mean, having spent a tremendous amount of years in commercial banking, and then I also spent some time in government, I think that combination of experience served me well in being able to represent the region needs and ensure that we get. So I am fairly confident now that the structure that the IDB Invest now has for the region will serve. And we have started to see some of the benefits. You realize for the first time, IDB has lent a tremendous amount of, I think it's 500 million to Neil and Massey. They've lent to Ansa McCall. Now, this is lending to our traditional companies, but they are helping them to hold their hands to expand their operations in Latin America, which is where IDB has a lot of knowledge.
You know, part of our effort on this series really is to encourage other nationals who are out there, you know, making their way, or those who intend to. I discern, as you spoke there, a heart for the region, right? And maybe this is associated with the national service that you did, you know, make here. But I would speak to the Caribbean national, the Trinbago national, who is making their way upward. Do you think that there's a responsibility, like you have taken on, to really represent the region and make sure, as you said, negotiate? I'm not sure how many persons carry that heart.
But again, you know, I hear you, and I mean, my whole impetus throughout my career, my banking career, my political life, it's about, my career was trying to add value. Right? It's about getting things done and adding value to the organization. Wherever I am placed, I have a saying that wherever I'm placed is where I'm supposed to be. So while I am there, I have to execute and get things done. And therefore, it happened when I went to Barbados, it happened when I went to Ghana, it happened when I go to IDB. You need to go in, assess what needs to happen, assess what is good for the region, yes, what is good for the institution, and then work towards making something happen. You know, at the end of the day, if wishes were horses, beggars will ride. Right, yes. That's a saying that I go. So you can't just wish it. Yes. You have to decide, what do I need to do to get it done? At the pillar of anywhere that I am is, how do I fix the problem and get it done? The other pillar that I stand on is the whole idea of hard work. I mean, I came from a family and a background with a father that gave me my 70th birthday present, was a poem, framed, yes, right? I still have it on my wall. It talks about the success of men achieved and kept were not obtained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling onwards in the night. So for me, you need to then work hard, yes, right? So that is what I do, and that comes out in everything that I am called upon. Assess, execute, and execute through hard work, yes, yes, and make sure something happens. So when you leave the place a little slightly better than you met it. And that's what I did at IDB.
And I think that's a great mission, you know, leaving the place better, right? And I hope that those of you listening on, you know, you get the idea of adding value, right? But in your career, you mentioned Barbados, you mentioned Africa. How did Africa enter the story?
Well, you know, Africa is there are two reasons, again, how Africa entered the story. I mean, I think all of us, coming from Afro-Trinidadians, there's a nostalgic view about Africa for all of us. You know, we always recognize, it's almost like an orphan child wanting to find out who your real parents were. So there's been a lot of conversation about Africa and, yes, wanting to be part of that. But in addition to that, I found myself coming back from Barbados in charge of Republic Bank's general manager in charge of finance and strategy. And we were then saying, okay, Republic Bank, we have a value proposition. We know what we are doing. We are dominant in Trinidad. We are dominant in the Eastern Caribbean. Where do we go next? How do we expand? We decided, well, okay, let's look at the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, because the English-speaking Caribbean, we think, is a small compared to the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. So we looked at Dominican Republic. But we recognize going to Dominican Republic, and again, all of this is lessons on how you go into a market, because it really is important. As small as it is, Republic Bank going to Dominican Republic to open a bank, a small island, and we said, well, that's right there, it's close. It seems natural, yes, that's where you should go. But again, what were we selling? We were selling a banking product. Banking products are built on relationships. Relationship meant that you had to be able to interact freely, to be able to read the papers, to know what's going on. And just that might seem obvious, but it was difficult when you don't know the language. When you go to a cocktail party as a bank and you're not fluent, well, you can't interact. When you're dealing with different laws, then you have to, your learning curve became difficult. So as much as we were successful, tremendously, very successful in Barbados, around that same time, we went to Dominican Republic and had to retreat. So coming out of that experience, we got to step back and say, so, okay, so what do? You can't sit on your capital. You got to grow, because if you don't grow, you will then, inertia will come in. So we decided, okay, let's get some professional help and let's decide where could we add value. And if we think about it logically, could we go and add value of banking as a third world country in the United States? Not so sure. I mean, what could we really teach somebody in the United States to do? Could we go to London, English speaking? Not so sure. So if you think about it, is where we, in our thought pattern and thinking about looking at the world scan, we decided, well, let's go to where you have a large group of English-speaking countries, probably past colonies that had English law so that we could understand. And if you do that scan, sub-Saharan Africa is where it came up. So again, look what we thought about. We want to go, we weren't looking to Africa because it sounded exciting. We went looking for a market where we knew we could add value. So it's all about what value could you add? What is your value proposition? And then you start to mirror your value proposition with what's out there. And that's really what led us. When we decided that sub-Saharan Africa, we again partnered with some of our international players, the World Bank, IFC at the time, and say, listen, we want to go to Africa, right? But we don't know that place. You have been there as the World Bank at IFC. How could you help us? So again, lessons learned. Don't be prepared. Don't think you know it all. Look for people who have done it before. IFC was World Bank. They have lendings, and they said, great. And they took us throughout Africa and decided, look at different options where they have helped banks, where they have partnered, and they will show us, introduce us to different markets. And we went back to school. We went back to school to understand what is our value proposition, how will that mesh happen. After a little bit of analysis, we narrowed it down to West Africa, and then we further narrowed it down to Ghana because, one, the economics of Ghana was bigger. Ghana had just gotten oil. The GDP of Ghana, we felt the safety factor of Ghana was better than South Africa, right? We didn't want a market as big as Nigeria. We felt Ghana was a little bit more orderly, so it gave us a softer landing. That didn't mean we didn't think we will end up in South Africa or Nigeria. Another lesson, we got to decide where you will get the best soft landing. And where you enter might not be the best market because, of course, you're going to West Africa. Let's go to Nigeria, 175 million people. We could definitely add value there. But coming from 1.3 million to operate in a market with 175 million is a little much. So we went to Ghana, and we felt that is where we could have been able to add value. And the economics of Ghana, and there were already some trade missions with regard to NGC and oil happening. So that's really where Ghana is. So it was part of that whole idea. Yes, the nostalgia, But nostalgia is one thing, and I admit. But at the end of the day, the numbers, the research need to make sense.
I like so much of what I'm hearing there about the preparation, the planning, the assessment, and most importantly, this whole idea of Africa being the flavor of the day. This wasn't the situation. You really looked at how you could add value and what made sense to the bank. So what do you remember about first arriving in Ghana?
Boy, I tell you, you know, that I had fun memories in Ghana, I must admit. So you see me smile. But again, arriving in Ghana, one of the things that was very shocking, and I mean, it's a little funny. So right after, and I say this in a little story to tell you what was significant. So there were some friends of mine came up, right? And I saw them, and I was hesitating to want to go to them to speak. So one of the guys says, "But what happened, Lee? Like, what happened to you? Because you're across here, you don't know your friends or what?" And I had to admit to them what happened, because there were so many people previously that I saw in Ghana that I almost went up to and said, "Hey, what you doing here?" Only to find out that I was talking to somebody else. I mean, you will be amazed how many people
like this
that you will realize look like yourself.
Yes,
and and therefore that was striking to me, how much there were people. And when I speak to the delegation of people from Ghana that come down here, right? I brought some individuals in 2023. They said the same thing,
yes.
Right? When that same question was asked, I heard them say the same answer. So yes, you will be taken aback as to how the place looks familiar. I was also amazed of how much I found a place that liked fried plantain more than us. I mean, they like their fried plantain, and you know Trinidadians like a fried plantain. I am one that like fried plantain. So again, some of the food were a little bit similar too.
Yeah.
So that to me was what I found as my first impression to the place.
But so there's a similarity in some of the food and how people look, but what did that say for the culture though? What was the cultural dimension? Was it the same? Was it similar? Were there any surprises?
But again, that was also, I mean, as much as what was also striking about that whole connection is that how much you could realize that people look familiar, but familiarity is such a different in culture. And that don't be fooled by virtue of the fact that they look familiar, they look similar, but culture was important. And to a large extent, I had to realize that I almost had to recognize I'm in a new place. I had to survive in this place. I had to learn their culture. I was a minority. I couldn't change their culture. Yes. I had to learn, understand, adapt. Because I was one person. I was no longer Republic Bank in Trinidad and Tobago, the big bad blue machine. I was a small bank with accounts from a country that people don't even know where it is. And it was me. I had to understand their culture and I had to adapt and recognize that their culture was different. And that varied for a number of things from us. You know, you went into a room and I mean, as simple, crazy as it may sound, you sit into a meeting and the first thing that the person, when they say you are welcome, that is your cue to start to talk.
Okay.
So they wouldn't say, so, you know, we might say in Trinidad, so how can I help you?
Yes.
And that is your cue.
Yes.
But their cue to start to talk is, you're welcome.
Yes.
And I went to a few meetings and they keep saying, you're welcome, and I say, thank you. And they say, you're welcome, and I say, thank you.
Yes.
And then everybody kind of wondering, well, what are you here for? But I am not hearing that. That is just words, yes, you know, but it just tells you how you got to spend time in learning and understanding, right? What you need to do.
And not assume because if they feel familiar or look alike.
Don't take that. And don't think that you could now go there and tell them what is right and what is wrong, because you do not have that moral authority, right? You learned what was insulting. Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, utilizing of your left hand, for example, is an insult. Okay. In Trinidad, you have something on this hand and you touch a man and you touch him with your left hand, right? You just don't do that. Wow. You have to extend on your right hand. Wow. And it is it is insulting. So you are actually insulting someone by trying to touch them with your left hand. Now, in Trinidad, we all know you shake with your right hand, but it's not a big thing if you tap a man on the back with your left hand, right? So, small things, but you're recognizing how important it is in how you interact, and if you are in somebody's country, right, you have to be able to understand, right, how you operate in that particular environment.
And in ways in which this impacted business, because no doubt as you were doing your negotiations and so forth, you had to assess how hard to go, when to pull back. How did it impact business relations?
Well, again, one thing I learned there in Ghana, of course, in Trinidad, you go through a hard negotiations with someone, and we negotiate hard, and we fight, and then at the end of the day, we come to a position and we say yes, right? We agree, yes. Put the last position and you think you have a deal. In Ghana, Ghanaians don't like confrontation. They're generally a group of people who don't like, actually, if I have to pick a Caribbean country like that, they're more like Bajans.
Okay.
They don't like confrontations. And therefore, what yes meant in Ghana, yes was a convenient word used to avoid a difficult question. So, when you are in negotiations and a man said yes, that do not accept that to mean tomorrow morning we are coming back to sign.
Yes.
Yes means, well, okay, I will think about it. I am coming back tomorrow. I will sleep on it. Or you have pushed him to a point in the negotiation where he was uncomfortable. And he said, yes, but tomorrow morning is a no. No. We will, in our culture, oh, that's unethical. You tell me yes already. How you could do me that? And you want to huff and puff. That is not the approach, all right? You have to understand the arrangements, how it is, and recognize that tomorrow you're coming back at that same point. Wow. And we are now going to get into it until we reach to a position that we are comfortable.
So I guess I demanded a lot more patience, a lot more tolerance. But these points are so important because I can see businesses making those errors even right here in Tobago, right? We may assume because it's Tobago, but even there are the cultural dimensions. So very important point. So did it take you long to figure this out, or how long did it take?
Well, one thing I could tell you, in the early stage, it was very emotionally draining. Okay. Because you will go into a hard negotiations, and you finish a negotiation, and you go home, and you unwind, and you take a drink, and you say, oh, gosh, yes, I'm finished. But it was emotional to come back the next day and realize that the negotiation wasn't finished, and you're starting back. Wow. So if you do not understand, you almost want to give up. Yeah. And by giving up, you give in to what exactly. So you have to, as I said, understand that. But what I found helped me, and which again is what something Republic Bank invested a lot in, was consultants. and people that we could trust. People, so when we went there, we recognized we had a team of people, some lawyers. We had a team of people who were helping us in the finance and the business transaction. But there was a team of people that just simply was working with me and on how do you operate in the business environment. How do you assimilate yourself? What were the cultural norms? What were the things? How would you deal? Somebody to let out your frustration with and will give you back the answer. So we actually, and how do we sell Republic Bank as a Caribbean entity, as a foreign bank? How do we sell that to the Ghanaians? And that was important. So we had a group of people helping us in that and providing us. And these were local Ghanaians. So we had a team, a company called Stratcom, with a number of key individuals, because in Ghana, connections is important. Relationships is important. That comes out of their history. What Nkrumah did as an attempt to help the country bind together with a number of tribes, he created a number of boarding schools. So in Ghana, everyone goes to boarding school between 14 and 16. And that caused the country to integrate. And he mixed the people who went to these different boarding schools. And in that boarding school, you live together, you sleep together, you do the things. So it's like probably the equivalent of Form 4 to Form 6 in Trinidad. And therefore, you created a new group of people. So in Ghana, what school you went to and what were the connections that people had with their schoolmates was a little bit deeper than what you will have in Trinidad. In Ghana, when you ask, well, where are you from? Where you from is always get the answer where I was born. So when somebody asks me where I'm from, I'm not from, right now where I'm from Mocha. No, Mocha is where you live now. Where are you from? I'm from Santa Flora, Saparia. That's where my parents came from. That's where my people. And therefore, there is, when I die, that's where I will go back. I go back there. So there is always a connection, a group of people that is always going to funerals. And if you really want to meet somebody important, you therefore need to understand where they're from, what school that they went to, and who is the chief in that particular area that they're from. Because those people are the ones that have influence on that person.
Yes, including all the business. I want to switch a little bit to, well, we understand the cultural dimension and some of the historical aspects that you spoke about. No doubt this may have had some impact on the strategy that the bank used, because the bank didn't just, jump in and buy a bank and start. There was a progressive strategy. No doubt, maybe you can speak a little bit about this strategy, this progressive strategy.
Well, we felt, in coming up with a strategy with most of our advisors and so forth, we felt that the best approach was one of buying into a bank. Our whole intentions, Republic Bank's expansion strategy was always centered on we must have control. Because to do the things that we need to do in transforming the bank and to add the value and to add the work that we wanted to do, we needed to be able to have control of the bank in some form. And that was our strategy in the Caribbean. A next lesson, that you might have a strategy for one region, but you could have an alternative strategy for another. Yes. So we had that strategy for the Caribbean region because this was our backyard, this was our home. In going into Africa, we recognized, okay, this is totally virgin territory. Probably we could tweak that strategy a little bit. Because when we go and we have control of a bank, we now need to learn this place and run a bank. So you're almost doing two things at once.
Same time, yeah.
So we took a position that we would have had an arrangement to buy majority shares in this bank over a period. But we took a 29% stake in the bank, which allowed us 2 board of directors and a series of executives on the board and on the board and in the bank. So together we were going to work, and I was the senior executive that went in the bank itself to work with the bank to understand. So we were doing 2 things, adding value, learning the environment. And I mean, again, another learning. But, you know, so that was really the reason behind and the logic behind that particular. So we entered the bank underlying utilizing that strategy.
No doubt, I'm sure they were sniffing out a bigger deal at hand here, you know, a bigger objective. I take it there was a challenge to take control. There was a fight back. There were pushback on the Ghanaian, from the Ghanaian people.
Well, again, you know, again, it shows that you have to be flexible, and it also means that, you know, everything with your best plan doesn't always work out. So we went in there and we had a strategic agreement so that we would have increased our shareholdings every year, and in 4 years' time we would have been in control of the bank with a majority shareholdings. And we had all these legal agreements signed up. Well, thank God we just didn't take it. We had all these legal agreements signed up for this.
It wasn't a gentleman's
It wasn't
agreement.
just simply a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
As fate will turn out, after 1 year, our strategic partner decided that we don't need us anymore, and basically fired us.
Wow.
Said, I no longer need you as a strategic partner.
Wow.
All your executives could pack up and leave, all right? You could sit on the board and have 2 seats, but this thing is finished.
Wow.
And at that time, again, that was not expected. That was not what we wanted. As you would recognize, there would always be people for and against you. Could you imagine the people who were against us going to Africa in the first place? How much that was? You see what I tell you? You're going there, why you're going there, etc., etc. And with the management, with the executive, and you got to ensure when you're going that you have dedication and support. So the managing director, the chairman, Mr. Harford, Mr. Doolal Whiteway, was committed to this strategy.
Yes.
And therefore we decided, okay, this is what you want. We disrupted, we sent most of the individuals home. And I stayed in Ghana, and I remember I took out a card, and at one point I was the executive director of HFC, and I flipped the card on the other side and I put Robert LeHunt, Director, African Operations, Republic Bank.
Wow.
And I stayed, and we decided we will fight this.
Yes.
We will fight the legal battle because we felt we were on solid ground.
Yes.
And we will utilize this time with the legal battle to win the hearts of the people of Ghana in accepting Republic Bank. Because now we recognize that we can't do the work through HFC. We now have to do that work of winning the hearts of the people. So we spent the next 2 years doing that, fighting on one ground legally, whilst winning the heart. I call it steel band diplomacy. We brought steel band, we explained to them that we were not foreigners. We had to go through a whole transition, that we are not foreigners. We are really people of I'm your brother and sister from another, that we happen to have been sent to the Caribbean, and now I am coming back to assist. So much so, and with the success, I mean, one of the greatest things that had happened to me is that I was by one of the chiefs. My name is Ni Kojo Ababio. Ni Kojo means that Kojo is when the day that I was born on a Monday, and that's the name, but Abobio means the one that went away and came back.
Wow.
So
what's your passport then?
So I got, well, you also know there's a backstory behind that. You know, I also got citizenship, which I had to go and renege, and that was a whole mysterious story.
Yeah, but clearly I'm seeing, you know, we're not going to go there. Some of that budding politician, I don't know if you were in politics before then, but clearly your whole idea of winning the people and understanding, you know, getting the hearts on your side, you know, it was reflected there, yeah?
Yes, I mean, and therefore, again, it shows, again, utilizing, because we are all about understanding from this story, what are the things that, what are the lessons that you could learn from it. Yeah. And again, it shows that one, when you are going to somewhere, it is not going and expanding into a new market. It's not for the faint-hearted, right? It requires a lot of preparation. It requires a lot of documentation, but it's not for the faint-hearted, because all of that, and then it might not work. So at the end of the day, you gotta be prepared to fight. You gotta be prepared, if this is important for you or for your company, that life is not, as Shadow said, life is not a dream. It's more like a canoe going down a stream. It goes up and down. You got to be able to ride your waves, and therefore put things in place when things are not going well, as how you're going to pivot and move. So we had a plan. The plan did not work, or it did not go according to how it was expected. How do you pivot? How do you pivot quickly? How do you execute another plan while staying focused on the end game? Yes, and that was the lesson that that is what we had to do at that point in time. We need to create new friends. We need to influence new people. I mean, during that 2 years, I mean, I probably went to more funerals than I felt that I have ever even did in my whole life in Trinidad, because to meet the right people, I had to go where they were, and I end up having to go to the funerals at times to have meetings and to talk to the people and to get introduced to the right people. So it's a lot of work. It took a lot of work.
Fully committed. That's commitment.
It was commitment.
And you spoke earlier about the hard work, and you put in the elbow grease to make it a reality.
Put in the elbow grease, do the work, going to the different meetings, as I said, going, even if it meant going to funerals. Right? Every day for 2 years, I stood up, I went, I had my press conferences, I had my activities, and it was a coordinated plan. So that consultant that I spoke to you about, who was therefore just engaged to allow for me to simulate, that person then went on a longer term contract, and that became my key advisor whilst we fought the battle on the legal front.
Wow, wow. So, I mean, this is really tremendous, you know, the time, the level of commitment, the level of research. Certainly you're determined that you would integrate, you know, into the society, understand its norm, its cultures, its belief, its value system. But would you say that, I don't know if you'd call it a gamble, that this paid off? Did this thinking that this approach would work, would you say it paid off?
Well, I would say definitely. I mean, when you know, in hindsight, we were able to recognizing, again, from the analysis of the importance of the legal system, we were able to get the best lawyers. Our legal system here, keeping Trinidad always abreast was important, so that Trinidad was able to add value, because they were the same legal system that we had. And we were able to win all the legal cases. We were able to get the NIB, or the equivalent of the NIB. No different, the NIB here always have significant shareholdings. And it was important that the NIB, or which is called SNIT in that regard, we needed to get them to vote with us to take over, change the management of the bank, and allow us to be able to take over the bank. So encouraging and being able to win them over together with the other supporters. I think at the end of the day, I remember in one of my interviews, I said, listen to me, you can't call me a foreigner. I am not a foreigner. You have been writing on your walls, apologizing as to what you did to your ancestors that you sent across there. I said, I am a product of that. And I am coming back. So, I mean, technically, it is my great-great-grandfather that you were apologizing to. So, I mean, you can't call me a foreigner. I am just here accepting your apology because you did say that you were sorry for what you did. So you can't be one day saying that you're sorry and his great-great-grandson comes back here and you're saying, well, now you're a foreigner.
Boy, Robert, listen, we have to wrap. Certainly we'd love to have you back. You know, we need to have a part 2. We need to really have you. But before we wrap, I just have a question I'd like to ask our guests. We call it the Fast Five, right? And I'm so thankful about this opportunity because the research I did suggested or indicated that Republic Bank is the only Caribbean-based entity established on the African continent. I don't know if you could corroborate, but I wasn't able to find anything. I mean, there's a lot of trade taking place, but nothing necessarily established.
No, actually, when you look at it, I mean, the reality is when we made that investment, we got the award and we were honored by the Ghanaian government. And one of the things that we got the award, that award was actually the largest investment made by a diaspora company back into Africa. So there are a number of people talk about going back to Africa, and yes, I have no problem in coming back, and we could talk about markets and different things and so forth. But at the end of the day, since Marcus Garvey days, it never really happened.
Never materialized,
right? Yes. That's because, as you see, it's not an easy road, and it's not for the faint-hearted. But this investment actually was one of the largest investments made. And therefore, and the investment 10 years after, the bank just celebrated 10 years because we took over in 2015. And when you look at our results in 2025, the bank is now contributing to the overall Republic Bank, all the shareholders in Trinidad, right? The bank is probably making in excess of 170 million TT dollars, right? You know, so it is a significant achievement from that perspective. So it has been very successful, and it contributes to the bottom line of Republic Bank. So I would think we were successful from that perspective, and we achieved our goal.
So great to have you, Robert. But as we wrap up, we have a whiteboard with us, you know, today. And you have the opportunity to help another SME or anyone else thinking about it, entering the African market. What would be the 5 things you'd put on that whiteboard as essentials, as must-haves, as we wrap the interview?
Well, you know, one of the things I'll let him know, right, is that, listen, when you say entering the African market, I mean, Africa is a big market. At the end of the day, you could put a number of countries and still fit into Africa. A big part of Europe, all of the United States, Canada, Russia, and there will still be space. So we can't, when you want to go into the African market, where exactly do you want to go? You need to do your research. You need to determine, are you going West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, South Africa? Where are you looking at in Africa, right? So which market and why? Where do you feel, as I talked about, where do you feel you could make that soft landing to entry, right? Republic Bank did it. What is your value proposition? What are you selling? What it is that you want to sell? What it is you want to contribute? What is the service that you are doing, right? And how are you differentiating that service from what happens there? And in that, to do both of those things, you can't just simply feel you could do those things from Trinidad. You got to be prepared to go there, to put people there. I was there, I went there. When Republic Bank made that investment, even before, I mean, we traveled throughout Africa. I went to Africa probably about 6 or 7 times in Ghana to be there. And then we decided when we were going, I actually went and lived there to do it. So you got to be able, if this is important, to be able to put the resources and so forth behind what you have to do. Yeah. In your investment, I mean, look at your balance sheet. I didn't talk about that as much, but you got to look at, you can't take your whole equity. What do you have? What is your value at risk? At risk, yeah. How much money do you feel you want to put at risk? All right? Am I going to invest 20% of my equity, which I feel I could lose? Yes. Or because you don't want to take your whole operations and bet it on one new market that is new. This is not again a chance. Yes. And make sure, and never be prepared when you go, be very cognizant in David Dollar White, we gave me one piece of advice, and which is what he got from his father. He says, you know, you have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Yes. When you go to a new market, be prepared to listen, observe twice as much as you speak. Yes. So be prepared when you go to this market to spend some time understanding the culture, yes. Understanding who you are. You might be big in Trinidad, but nobody knows who you are. And Trinidadians like to talk. They like to give advice. Pull that back, yes. Right? And decide that be a student yes, and yes. Be prepared to listen, because yes. You might then, if you rush, you might end up getting dubbed. Wow. All right.
Robert, listen, this has been, you've taken us to school, right? I feel like I've been in a university class here. And this is really tremendous. And it's so great to have you. You know, we're really looking forward to having you back on the 868. And unfortunately, we have to wrap. That's it for us. But there was so much that we could glean from this discussion. We just took a couple pages out of one of the chapters of the life of Robert LaHunt, who I consider to be a national treasure. And if you missed some of it, he spoke about the importance of understanding your market, the understanding of your value proposition, understanding the people that you need to have on the ground and the partnerships you need to make, understanding the culture and the rules and the norms. Even though people may look alike, they may have very different ways of doing business. And of course, make sure you assess your risk. So this is just some of what we got today on the 868, looking at the story of Robert LaHunt and what they did in Africa. And stay tuned. For more, we have a lot more coming up on the 868. Nice of you to have us. Looking forward to having you on future sessions.
WESN